All right, guys, we are back again with the Dynamic Man podcast, episode 14, where we will be talking about many things today, but also duty sex, a Madonna-Whore complex, and why Gen Z can't find love. And we're going to be talking about within that a lot of the stuff with radical feminism, red pill, and really where a lot of the neurosis and divide comes from and how that might reconcile over time. What does that look like? I apologize for those of you who are waiting. It's about 20 minutes late for this. That happens when you have client calls scheduled back to back and things went over sometimes. So appreciate your patience with all of that. We weren't planning on doing this so quickly, right? I think I said when I did episode 13 yesterday, I was talking about how, might do one or two of these a week, depending on the content. Well, there's a lot of content that happened just in the last 24 hours. It seemed like right after I finished the show, a tweet that I had talked about a little bit. I didn't display or go into detail with it, but a tweet I had talked about a little bit in yesterday's show started to really get covered by the rad femmes, the radical feminists, right? I guess who are the new wave of the old thing. So I want to talk a little bit about all that because I think there's some things to clear up here, and we'll try to learn from everybody's perspective here and find the truth in the middle, as always, the nuance in the middle. So first off, let's show this horror story and what that they got all outraged about my comment on. So let's look at the story first. So I knew a man who left his wife of 22 years and 4 kids for a prostitute and her son. He paid for the prostitute's $8,000 nose job, did not give a dollar to his struggling college student daughter. Years later, his brother became unhappy with his marriage of 30 plus years. The prostitute recommended another prostitute to his brother. He left his wife of 30 plus years for the prostitute with 3 kids. I wish I could say I was making it up. Pretty awful story. I think everybody can agree that's a pretty awful story, and tragic and disturbing. So let's go to my comment, right? So okay, off the back, not defending this, and it's obviously tragic. Okay, so I say this off the bat, but you know how it is. Unfortunately, sometimes very much with women too, although hysterical men are the same way. Not trying to view anything I'm saying here in good faith, but I say not defending this, and it's obviously tragic, but it illustrates an issue I've hammered on time and again on here. Men do not simply want the good girl Madonna. Even if they say they do, they are lying to themselves in the same way women are when they claim they just want a nice guy. Men want a woman who is enthusiastic sexually and open. They do not want to feel like their commitment deprived them of good sex. They want to feel like it enhanced it. Yes, they also want a woman who is loyal, caring, supportive, all of the good girl qualities, but that is the comfort, not desire side of attraction. Women who get married and stop having sex or putting any effort into sex are creating massive resentment in their men and are basically asking to get cheated on or ditched. The best case scenario is a man who is loyal but cold. The best advice I could ever give a woman is to be sexually available and eager in a relationship, even if a woman does nothing else and acts like a bitch otherwise. Not recommended. A lot of men will stick around because they're at least satisfied where it matters, most of them. So the reason I mentioned this, the reason I made this comment is obviously not to justify what this guy did, right? This guy did some really messed up stuff. It's one thing to divorce your wife, right? It's another thing to ditch your entire family for some prostitute. Okay, like I'm not defending this. I'm not defending it, and I think any guy who does do it definitely has something wrong with him. Okay, I'm not trying to pretend that the guy doesn't have anything wrong with him, that he's like perfect and he's innocent. But in every dynamic, there are 2 things going on. There's what's going on with the man, and there's what's going on with the woman. And I'm just telling you, whatever issues this guy had, and he obviously had issues, right? There's no question in my mind from reading this that there was not something else going on within the marriage, and that the woman, probably from the sexual perspective, considering he ended up with a whore, right? He was having some real issue with the sex in his marriage. And it's possible she was having sex with him regularly, but it was very like bland and unenthusiastic sex. And if that's the case, is it a little bit of her fault? Sure, but a lot of it's also him for not necessarily pushing on that envelope, right? But we don't know what the sex life is. I'm using this as a hypothetical explanation because it's a common dynamic where you see guys blow up their entire lives. Guys freak out, essentially. They freak out because their sex life is terrible in their marriage. They feel trapped with a woman who is viewing them purely from a provisioning standpoint and feels very entitled. And as if to like emphasize this, a lot of the radical feminists with their comments came in and started going crazy about this. Now, actually, Radfem Hitler, I know a lot of guys hate Radfem Hitler, but I actually like Radfem Hitler. She's obviously radical, and there's tons I don't agree with her on, but she is able to also, I think that she provides a counterbalance to the red pill in some ways. There are certain things that she's able to see, even though she's very toxic. There are certain things that she's able to see that I think are actually insightful. Now, in this case, she's actually pretty diplomatic with me, unlike a lot of her followers. And she's making a point that I actually 100% or not 100% agree with, but I understand what she's saying. So she says, it can't be on the woman to just force themselves into being sexually open. This doesn't work. If you're having sex with a man because you feel obligated to do so, you will hate him more with every passing day. You will eventually wish death upon him, in fact. Men have to lead the sexual relationship, but they lead it by being attractive and fuckable and inspiring lust because women are the responsive desired gender, not by demanding sex that's already unwanted. So here's where I agree with her. Duty sex does not work. It doesn't work. Okay. And if a woman has disgust for the man that she's with, there is no question that relationship isn't going to work out. It's not going to work out because she is going to appropriately feel like she's being used. And, it's almost like it's transactional, but in some ways it's actually worse than if she was a whore, because in a whore, at least there's some degree of like, well, I don't feel like doing it. I don't feel like engaging in the transaction right now. But in the sense of being married to somebody and feeling obligated all the time to have sex with them, I get it. Like I obviously get that. And, there's the famous red pill trope. You can't negotiate desire. It's correct. I know Rollo Tomasi was the one who coined it. I don't like Rollo, but he's correct about it. You can't negotiate desire. So to some extent, what Radfem Hitler is saying here is correct, that you have to lead the sexual relationship, but lead it by being attractive and fuckable and inspiring lust because women are the responsive desired gender, not by demanding sex that's already unwanted. But here's where things get more complicated. And this is where feminists fuck up, are unable to understand it, or unable to accept it. And I'm telling you that I have worked with hundreds of guys, right? Over 300 guys. And, I've been in this space I've been a coach for over a decade. I've been in this space for, God, we're over 15 years, right? Very long time I've been in this space understanding this stuff, right? 17 years. Okay. A woman could be attracted to a man that she's with. She could enjoy having sex with him. And then in a relationship with him, she suddenly loses interest. Or it's not suddenly, it's usually a gradual loss of interest. And this has nothing to do with, or marginally to do with the man himself and what he's doing to inspire lust. Okay. This has to do with some of the stuff that we talked about on the last show, which I'm not going to fully reiterate. You guys go watch the last show where I talked about enmeshment in relationship, and the tension between two people diminishing as they get unified, and there's too much codependence, right? How codependence in a relationship kills desire, and how you have to individuate, right? If you want to hear a lot me talking about that in detail, watch yesterday's episode 13. But there's more to it that I didn't talk about, and I'm going to talk about that now. And that has to do with a woman's identity. Okay. Now, I wrote about this in detail on my blog in a post called Why Your Woman Stops Wanting to Have Sex. There's a lot of things. I talked about that issue comprehensively, actually, in that post. But one of the things about it that's really that, and I'm going to give myself credit here, because this topic is a topic that is very rarely spoken of. I'm not sure that many other coaches understand it, but women have an identity issue when it comes to sex in relationships. Radfem Hitler and a lot of these other feminists talk about how women, well, we don't have any, you have to make us turned on, right? So what they're actually asking for is for a man to then manipulate them, play hard to get in a relationship, because red pill guys understand quite correctly that if you get commitment like that and you start to get that familiarity, then you have to create, you have, either the route that I'm talking about where you go up and you individuate together, you create tension through psychological expansion and in conquering your fear internally within the relationship, or you get it by creating fear externally and playing power games. So what Radfem Hitler and these other feminists are talking about, like, you need to make me turned on. Okay, I'm going to go talk to another girl. That's dread game. Red pill guys understand this, and they're right. They're right. So these feminists, they're actually asking men to manipulate and abuse them if we want to turn them on. Because guys know, and saying contrary to it is nonsense. Guys know in a long-term relationship that you either need to, red pill guys will say you have to use dread game, or they'll just say it doesn't work. I'm giving you an alternative route. But the point is, if we're playing power dynamics, they're right. It's dread game. So this gets into a question like, well, if women have no control of their sexual agency, so you got to play with their minds like that? Is that what you have to do? Or can you help develop a woman's agency and expand her own identity? Okay. So what does that mean? That means that women having much more awareness of their own sexual nature and taking responsible for their own sexual nature. These are the best women to be in relationships with, because it's really frustrating as a guy. Look, I know game. Like, you can run game on a girl, you can seduce her, you can pick her up, you can sleep with her. You can run that honeymoon phase, few months, couple years, into the ground. You can move on to another girl, or you can keep them in competition with each other, right? Have a roster. One fades out. They're always trying to compete for your attention. I've done some of this stuff. I understand how it works, but that's obviously not a healthy, long-term, sustainable strategy. Okay? So if it's not a healthy, long-term, sustainable strategy, you have to do something else. The only relationships that stay healthy, vibrant, exciting, passionate, and full of trust over the long term are relationships where the woman starts to take sexual agency. And she starts to think, wait a minute, I am not just going to have sex. I'm not just going to wait till I'm not going to be a slave to fear and impulse. I'm not going to let my sexuality circuit be structured around fear. I'm going to decide I like sex. I want to have sex. I want to do it for myself. This is actually one of the things, people make up all sorts of explanations of why there's this trend of women as they get to their 40s and 50s being more horny. And people say, oh, well, it's because, they're trying to get rid of their eggs as fast as possible. Okay. It's not really true. I don't buy that for a second, especially because, this occurs for women who are in their 50s too. And at that point, they've gone through menopause. So that's not what's going on. So what is it? Why does that happen? Well, what's happening is that these women tend to, after being in a responsive, purely responsive, let's say reactive state their entire life, because it's not exactly responsiveness. You can be consciously responsive and unconsciously responsive. So let's say being in an unconsciously responsive state their entire life, horny only when they ovulate, not understanding it. Horny when a guy does this, not horny when they have no idea what turns them on, why it turns them on. When they get to be, 40s, they say, enough's enough. I like sex. I want to be sexual. And so they start to seek it out and choose it on their own terms. And those women are great to be with because they're confident. They're understanding that sex is part of who they are. They are sexual beings. They don't have to wait for a guy to mess with them in some way because they can seek it out on their own terms. Now, feminists would probably say, yeah, of course a woman can do that. But they're not putting the pieces together here. You choose as a woman in a relationship to want to have sex with the man that you care about. You have to choose that. If you think, well, he has to make me feel this, he has to make me feel that. Sorry, but I mean, he has to do things. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's some raw material that he has to bring to the table. He has to be in good shape. He should be behaving like a man, he should be behaving masculine way, taking care of things. But once he's checked the fundamental boxes, teasing her, messing with her, right? The usual stuff. But guys know from experience they can be on point like that, and they can be found perfectly attractive to other women. But the woman that they're with is not going to find them attractive. And it's not because the guy isn't doing something right. It's because the woman has turned off her sexual identity in the relationship. She has stopped viewing herself in those terms. And that's especially the case for women who have kids. So we talk about the Madonna-Whore complex. And I'm getting all this like crazy shit from some of these radical feminists about the Madonna-Whore complex, how guys are all fucked up. Well, first off, women have their own Madonna-Whore complex. It's called lover provider. And any woman who's honest with herself knows it. Red pill guys have seen it. The alpha fucks beta bucks, right? There's the guy that she wants to fuck. There's the guy that she wants to, commit to. There's a guy who she, it's both men and women have their own RK selected mating strategies. So women are not on some high horse about, oh, the men have the Madonna-Whore complex. Yeah, well, you got your own shit. Don't pretend you don't have it. We know you have it. We've experienced it. Okay? But it exists. The Madonna-Whore complex exists. And it is a dysfunctional thing. And you do see it in more, actually misogynistic cultures. Cultures that view women in a very, very strictly role-based nature have a very, very strong Madonna-Whore complex. And, it's no disrespect to my, Muslim or Arab followers or whatever. I'm just telling you from my own personal experience. In Morocco, when I traveled around Morocco for a summer, I saw like the most extreme versions of it ever. They considered, especially Western women, they categorize as the whore. They categorize Muslim women as the Madonna. Some sense they're maybe right about that, right? To some extent. But the point is that they were cheating. They were either like compulsively porn stuff or going after Western women because they were obsessed with getting the whore. They were obsessed with her. But they were also proud of their Madonna, but they were obsessed with the whore. It's a very, I would call it a backwards way. It's fragmented psyche. Totally makes it impossible to have a healthy relationship with a woman. Okay? The more a man falls into Madonna-Whore complex, the more messed up his relationships with women are going to be, because he's not looking for a woman to have some sort of reconciliation of whole, right? He's not looking for a woman to be everything that she can possibly be. He's looking to restrict her into boxes that he can use. Okay. So I'm not a fan of Madonna-Whore complex in guys. And it's something that we all have to work on to some extent. But you can't get rid of it in the sense that as a man, you want whore energy and you want Madonna energy, because everything in this world is about the reconciliation of opposites, right? Dark, light, positive, negative, masculine, feminine. It's a reconciliation of opposites. So we want the desire and the comfort from a woman. Okay, that's the Madonna and the whore. The Madonna's the comfort, the whore's the desire. So guys who don't know how to bring it out in a woman, both sides out in a woman, will separate them and get them from different women. And that's why affairs, for instance, tend to only function so long as the person is with his wife, right? A guy is only going to have a good relationship with his mistress, a hot relationship with his mistress, so long as he has his wife, because the wife operates as the opposite pole. He gets rid of the wife, tries to keep the mistress, then he's missing the Madonna. He starts to try to, it affects the energy that he's taking from the mistress. Everything falls apart, basically, right? It's a tale as old as time. Okay. But maybe you noticed in there when I was talking about this that he needs the woman to wear two different hats. Well, the woman herself has to decide to wear two different hats. And this is where the other problem is that when it comes to a lot of these feminists, like, it drives me crazy because they take no responsibility. They're all about feminism, right? They're all about women can do this, women can do that, women are great, women should have their own money. Well, how about you have some agency? How about you actually take responsibility for things in your own life, things that happen to you? That would actually be a really feminist proposition rather than just acting like a victim all the time. Because the bottom line is, in a relationship with a woman, and all the women, I know so many great women, both in real life, but online, on X, okay? Women who have fantastic marriages, okay? Fantastic marriages. And they have fantastic marriages because they understand these different hats that you have to put on. They understand that in some contexts, they're going to be a mother. In some contexts, they might be a boss bitch. In some contexts, they might be a high-powered woman. In other contexts, though, they are a feminine, submissive woman to their man. And in other contexts, they're this really dirty, kinky, sex-loving girl. So they understand that there's different hats, different roles to play in different environments. But the two fundamental ones is they understand that they can be a good girl and they can be a bad girl for the guy that they're with. That makes the guy happy. In the same way that a man who makes a woman happy is a man who can provide, is emotionally there, present for her, but who also can keep her on her toes, throw her, tease her, throw her off, doesn't take her shit, doesn't let himself get manipulated by her, right? A guy who has an edge to him. She wants the lover and the provider. So, I don't understand, like, people get so offended by all this stuff. And it's all just, it's crazy to me. Women have their own issues with Madonna-Whore because a lot of women, after they get married, and especially after they have kids, they start to think of themselves as asexual. And some of it's hormonal. In their defense, the hormones from kids definitely affect this thinking to some extent, but women can overcome it. They can consciously choose to be more sexual. They can consciously choose it. And that's what's missing from this equation here. I don't know if that's what's missing from the equation in the whore story, but I have a pretty good idea about it because the guy literally went to a whore. So I can bet you it's pretty likely that his wife was a Madonna. And she was probably pretty sexually frigid. Does that mean that she deserved what happened to him? Does that mean he operated great? Absolutely not. Doesn't mean that. But you can explain something without defending it. Some of these girls are incapable of doing that. So, you only get 10 presentation things here on StreamYard. So I'm not taking all these screenshots. I don't want to bore you with it. You can check out X if you want to check out X. I'm just giving you the ones that matter. But this is her response to my prior post when I talked about women operating in what am I trying to say here? When I talked about why this guy may have left for the whore, right? This dynamic that occurs very frequently. She said, men will leave their kids to make their penis happy. And this is exactly why women should never list men on a birth certificate or give the child the father's last name. Now, I mean, it's funny because I make this comment. There's an insinuation about me. Like I put my wife on shared property. I have, not only because I have no intention of leaving her, right? But it's also because we built a lot of the stuff together. She's been with me through the trenches from the beginning. So, but this is nonsense. Like list men on the birth certificate. My wife, because my wife isn't fucking mentally ill, would be through the roof if I didn't have my name on her birth certificate. Like this, it's stuff is crazy. I'm going to show you some stuff about this woman though. But I said, great example of women who operate in bad faith, because there are multiple women in this conversation, right? Yes, men must avoid these women, but their attitude also shows why you shouldn't operate in bad faith yourselves. Look at what selfishness does to gender dynamics. Your actions can either cause harm to women or help to heal them. And then she goes off. She says, heal, you mean convince women to do sex acts they aren't comfortable with by threatening them with infidelity. Weak men, controlled by sex, lacking in honor, void of commitment to their family are not a prize. You know what is a prize? Alimony. Keep it up. Blah, 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 blah. Cry more. Absolutely miserable person. I mean, there's not much else to say about this. I'm going to show you some interesting stuff to tell you just about what kind of person we're dealing with here. And, in her defense, why maybe she feels, what maybe she's been programmed in this direction. But here's the thing, right? When you use women, you end up creating women like this. There is like, I have seen really sweet girls start to get sucked into the radical feminism thing, and they get sucked into it because they have a bad experience with guys. Now, I also, guys who break their heart, guys who break their trust. I've talked about this. Red Pill went fucking crazy about it. No kidding, because the red pill's the exact same way. A girl treats them in bad faith, and then they go crazy. So look, I have the 3 tenets of being a dynamic man, right? Facing your fears, expanding awareness, and operating in good faith. This good faith stuff, this is why society's broken. This is the stuff that is completely fucking up society. So if we want to change this, if you're talking about how things are bad in society, you have to quote Mandela, right? Quote Nelson Mandela. I know some controversial to some people. Be the change you want to see in the world. He's right about that. That is exactly right. Do not go around spreading this poison. This is poison. Everything that this woman is saying, Patriot Turf, is poison. And what you do when you interact with a woman like this, don't try to like mess with her. Just get away from her. Just tell her like, hey, sorry, like I think you've been through some rough stuff. Like it's not what I'm interested in. Because she's not interested in having a healthy relationship. And you can see it firsthand, because this is some other stuff that she said. Too bad I'm 42, was married 15 years and had 2 kids with him before divorcing him for his porn use and abuse, took the house, the kids, his dog, half his income in retirement, both vehicles and all his assets. He's homeless now. Enjoy your fucking hand. And he says, after child support, his car payment, insurance, and credit cards, my ex-husband has about $500 left for rent, food, and gas. I told him to get a second job if he can't afford how to live. And he said, if I get a second job, they'll take part of it for child support. I mean, look, I don't know why did she divorce him? She says abuse. What was the abuse? I don't know. Maybe he was pressuring her into doing some things sexually she didn't want to do. Maybe he had some really severe porn addiction. I'm not saying this wasn't grounds to divorce him. Maybe it was grounds to divorce him. But this stuff right here, this is pretty insane malice. This is not a good person. Not a good person at all, right? Her husband might be somebody who she shouldn't feel like she needs to be with. I get that. This stuff after, haha, he's going to be homeless. Good for you, amazing. Like, why would you want to do that to the person? I mean, it's just really, it's sick predatory stuff. And women, if you're a woman watching this stream and you follow this stuff and you think that there's any wisdom whatsoever in here, like, good fucking luck in life. Good fucking luck, because you're going to really have a terrible life. Look at how miserable this person is. Look at how miserable they are. I mean, imagine being 42 with 2 kids. You're here, you're ranting online about how terrible your ex is. What a piece of shit he is. He's terrible. I'm ruining his life. Ha ha. Like, get a fucking life. Get a fucking life. All right, I'm gonna go look at some of these comments before we move to the next topic here. Layman Shepherd. How common is the phenomenon where women grow up and eventually choose to start seeking sex on their own terms and suddenly include men besides her husband? I don't think it's very common. You know, Girls Chase, who's a great account, amazing. This is like a real, like, he's one of those accounts on Twitter. I got to promote him more. I got to have him on the show because this is somebody who he's not a LARPer. He has real experience. I mean, he has been out picking up women for a really long time, but he is not like toxic. He doesn't have a toxic dynamic towards women. And, so I really want to get him on here, but he had a list and I'm not remembering everything. I agree with it completely. Don't make me think of it on the spot. Okay. But he was talking about a list of why women cheat. And I can paraphrase, I can off the top of my head already get most of them. You're not paying her enough attention, right? That can cause a woman to cheat, right? So if you have a really serious comfort issue that metastasizes, a woman can cheat to get attention from another guy. Of course, there's also, you let yourself go, you're undesirable, and a desirable guy enters the picture. And there's another example too he listed that was right. But the bottom line is that in most situations with cheating, it doesn't come out of the blue. There's something beneath the surface in the dynamic that is already leading to it. But if you're dealing with a woman who has a very high sex drive, it can be very hard to keep those women in committed relationships. So the kind of woman that you're describing, and it's not to say that there's only one variable, because there could have been a desire variable, right? Or there could have been a comfort variable. It could have been that, she wasn't getting turned on enough by you. But if she really, really is super sexual and wants to have has a really, really high sex drive, then she can start to want to have sex with other guys. And a lot of times those women you're only able to stay in a relationship with those women if it becomes open to some extent, because a lot of guys actually have a hard time keeping up with a woman like that. And, obviously a lot of them end up doing porn, right? So let's see the next one here. Layman Shepherd again. I found that high agency is the number one indicator I'll get along with someone. It seems hard to find in men, let alone women. Absolutely. And this is a consciousness issue. But to some extent, we're not necessarily looking for perfect, but the higher consciousness you are, the more you're going to really require someone of proximate consciousness to you, right? So the higher consciousness you get, to some extent, maybe the harder it gets, especially if for people who are young and high in consciousness. Like, I've worked with some guys in their early 20s, just super put together dudes, successful, because I'm not cheap to work with, right? And their big issue was finding girls their age that they wanted to date, because they didn't want to date women who were like a lot older, because they knew long term it was going to be a problem. But the only women that they were actually able to connect with, because of the level of agency that they had for their age, were often older women. And it's an interesting kind of problem. Seth, so many bitter men and women out there, wish it wasn't so. Absolutely. And Layman Shepherd again, yeah, it's really sad. It's kind of a death spiral we're stuck in. I got over my own bitterness. This is why I don't have much hope for society. So, all right, we're going to go to the next topic here. So we just talked a lot about the, how do I put this? Talked about the radical feminist, right? Who are really the modern analog of the red pill. So it's like The red pill developed in response to a feminized society, and then the radical feminists, the TERFs, right? They responded to the red pill, kind of like the younger generation thing, and they're just going at it with each other. And I hope that they stop. I hope that at least other people learn not to fall into it too much. But I don't know if this is going to be easy enough to read, but so Sulla, who's another great account here, said, "Why is Gen Z allergic to romance and love?" And he quotes this whole thing: "A rise in skepticism towards romance is a loss, not just for boys, but for society as a whole. Romantic love isn't better and more important than platonic love, but it's different. And telling yourself that you have no need for it doesn't necessarily make it true." Phillips talked to her students about an excerpt from Plato's Symposium, in which at the beginning of time, Zeus splits each human in two in order to foil their plan to overthrow the gods. From then on, everyone wanders around yearning for other half. Falling in love, according to the story, is when you finally find it. Alas, her students hated the story. They didn't like the idea of only one other person being meant for each of us, or the suggestion that they'd be incomplete without such a reunion. They told her that they wanted to be whole all by themselves, not dependent on a soulmate. They had a point. And yet Philip still felt that there was something sad about their reaction. They didn't seem to understand that relationships are an interpersonal exchange, she said, that they involve both feeling expanded by someone else and then some genuine sacrifices. You are at least a little dependent on someone in a relationship. That's what the symbiosis of love requires. It's scary, but it can be interesting and beautiful when it's good, and sometimes formative, even when you don't stay good. You might want to find out for yourself. And I responded to all this: the challenging times they are coming of age and will make romantics out of them yet. Frustration is how romantics are born. So why did I say this? Why did I say this? What am I, when I'm talking about this topic of this frustration that Gen Z has and how they want to be complete by themselves and they don't want to have somebody else. I think some of this impulse is good. Look, it's good to an extent, because in the reality is that you are ultimately on this journey yourself. Even when you get married, you're ultimately on this journey yourself. You are developing into a man or a woman in a more complete version of yourself. So there is this personal exploration. What the issue is that, so I think Gen Z, and I think many millennials as well, there is actually an idealism to these generations, but it's a misdirected idealism. It seems like the millennials are starting to turn now with the changes in the culture. First I'll just say, this is important. The boomers have left such an enormous impact on our culture. We don't even, someone posted this the other day, and I thought it was really, it wasn't like a complicated post, but it was profound. And he said, nobody has priced in the impact that's going to happen on society when the boomers go. And man, is that so true. Like, I mean, talk about a generation that has left a mark. For better or for worse, we are living in the boomer world, and it's falling apart because the boomers, they're entering their sunset. But what comes after the boomers is going to be very different. I mean, a lot of the boomer idealism, blank slate, everybody, that stuff is gone. You can feel it disappearing right now, along with a lot of the bullshit. So you have generations like millennials and Gen Z who, growing up, and Gen X as well to some extent, right? Growing up in a system that was really toxic. And it's natural that a lot of the response to it is going to be that they feel themselves like, yeah, I feel really, disgusted by this, right? Like, I don't want a part of this. How do I fix things? How do I change things? But I see even in this, right? They want to be whole all by themselves. They don't want to be dependent. I see in this is romantic. It's just that it's misdirected romanticism. There's a real desire for personal growth in we're not materialistic. The boomers are a very materialistic generation. The generations after them are not materialistic generations. So what does that mean? I think it means that because the intention is there, they are going to figure it out. A lot of them are going to figure it out. Even all this like red pill, rad femme stuff. Like there's no, I was talking to a client about this earlier today. There is no vision. People have no fucking vision. I'm going to talk about somebody who doesn't have any vision in a second, but they have no vision. Okay? They want to find the answer, but right now all they're doing is running around in circles and they're miserable. Romantics from this frustration end up reaching for bigger things. So I know that there's a lot of nihilism. I tend to think, and I think Trump has a big part to this because, you know, this whole you can just do things mindset. I think it's going to start to trickle into relationships. I can see it already. I can see that there's a lot of young women and there's a lot of young men and older women and older men for that matter who are questioning everything, the whole boomer paradigm. They're questioning it and they're saying, you know what? I don't know if this really worked. I can tell you, look, I'm going to be honest here about my own relationship, my own marriage. We've been on this journey too. It's not like we just like snapped our fingers and you're like, oh yeah, red pill perfect relationship, which by the way, we're not. I don't even try to necessarily emulate whatever fucking I don't know what the red pill like, hey, make me a sandwich, bitch. Like I don't know what the red pill ideal relationship is. I can just tell you that I have a really great relationship with my wife. Super respectful, super loving, lot of sex. Okay, even in spite of the fact that she's pregnant, we've got 2 little kids. It's not an issue for us. And it's not an issue for us because we are creating a new type of relationship, this next iteration of relationship. But there's a lot of conscious stuff here. Like I had to learn to become more of a man. I credit the manosphere as helping me to do that, the community, this growing consciousness. I can feel it affecting me myself, right? And my wife has also, for her part, felt the effects of the growing movement for femininity, you know, wanting to like a lot, we're changing the dynamics of how we've interacted with each other over the course of our relationship has gradually become more polarized by choice. That's happening because the times are changing. There's a lot of frustration, but people are going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out. Some are not going to figure it out though. Okay. Some are not going to figure it out and they're going to end up being cautionary tales. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So, you know, I think it's only fair since I did some roasting. So I did some roasting. First, I want to just feature this for a second here with Layman Shepherd. The torch was not handed off from the boomers. It's causing a shaking transition. A few of us Gen X and millennials who didn't fall apart will grab it for the Zoomers. And I agree with that completely. You can already see it. You can see it with there's a lot of Gen Xers and millennials, like between Vance, between a lot of the commentators. You can see that they are really trying to put something together. And I think Trump, who, you know, is a boomer, but not a spiritual boomer. You know what I mean? I think he's been really, especially the second term, he has been really cultivating that millennial Gen X and even to some extent Gen Z, you know, with Doge, maybe that's more Elon, but cultivating this like a deeper generational bench to carry the torch for the future. So I think that's going to be interesting. But so I was roasting the radical feminists. I was roasting them. Okay. But I got to roast the red pill too, because I want to show how this stuff contrasts on both sides. So you can see the toxicity in both directions and why why they don't work, right? Why you can't have a dynamic, you can't have these low trust dynamics between men and women because they don't operate in any productive manner. So this is a guy, the real JB, whatever fucking some red pill dork, right? And I'm not showing the whole exchange here because again, like limited slides. You guys don't need to see all this stuff. But the bottom line is he got into all this stuff to begin with because into with me because I was talking about marriage. He's like, stop fucking telling guys to get married. Fuck you. You know what I mean? It's like really angry response and strange. Like, I don't get this. I'll tell you, I don't get it. And it really opens you up like psychologically. Like, you can tell that somebody is severely messed up because I would never go to some playboy guy. I know plenty of them. I would never go and tell these guys, oh, you're a fucking loser, like you didn't get married, you're fucking. I would never say that to them. First off, because it's a weird thing to say. Okay, we have different choices. I can talk about in favor of marriage and dynamics. I can do that, but it's weird to like go out and have this like this fixation, you know what I mean? Like on what other people are doing. Like people have their own paths. And to me, as long as somebody is talking sense and is having some congruence, you know, like I'm going on French OG's show next week. I love French OG. You know, do I agree with everything he says? No, although I agree with most of it. I think he's very intelligent, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with him. French OG is a single guy. He's dating girls. He may be doing some things that I wouldn't necessarily be doing, but I understand where he's doing it from. He's doing it from like exploration, curiosity for the most part. He's not letting himself get poisoned, right? This guy is like totally poisoned, totally miserable. He's like angry that I tell people to get married. Well, that's like, you know, you find somebody else makes money and you say, fuck you, nobody can make money. Like you didn't earn it. You didn't, you know, it's just like weird. It's just weird stuff. But the reason I'm featuring this with him in particular is because he was talking about, like, you know, he's whatever, but he's talking about frame. And he says, this poor bastard who surrendered his frame to a woman many years ago is talking about frame with me. Never ever take advice from married men, period. Okay, well, it's pretty weird. Why wouldn't you take advice necessarily from a married guy, especially if that I get it if it's like, oh, I met my wife like in high school and we've been together forever. Okay, well, that guy didn't really date, so maybe he can't, and it was a different time, so maybe he can't give you that advice. And I dated for like 7 years, almost without interruption. Maybe one of those years, like half a decade, I was single. Okay. I was single for half a decade, active in game. I was dating a lot of women, and I've helped a lot of other guys to date women. And when you get a girl who you are very happy with and who's a great, I mean, my wife was with me through a year in prison, like, you know, it was half a decade of federal persecution, like having to be stuck at my parents' house because of all that shit. I mean, I have a good woman. I picked well. Okay. So I have an attractive woman who's loyal, who I have a great sex life with. Like, why would I not be somebody who could talk about this stuff? And I'm not trying to qualify myself. I don't need to qualify myself, but I'm pointing out here that he views being married as some implicit like frame surrender. And that's the most nonsense thing in the world. Any guy who has been married, any guy who's been in a relationship with a woman understands that the burdens on your frame go up dramatically. And I'm telling you this from experience. When I first got with my wife, you know, Slavic girl, right? I was great at getting women. I was great at picking up women, seducing women. Once I got into a relationship, once things got more serious, the honeymoon period started to fade. She started to see me for who I was. She started to see how I was so desperate for validation. And once that started to get sniffed out, once my game, you know, the persona I had created started to get figured out, then issues started to occur. And we did have like a frame fight. We had some contesting dynamics, right? But the point is, like, if you have a good marriage, you have a really strong frame. That's the point. If you have a good marriage, you have a really strong frame. If you avoid having any intimate dynamics with women, like you're just trying to have sex and get out, then you do not have a strong frame. You've proven effectively nothing when it comes to your frame. And if that's the way that you have to interact with women, then you actually have a pretty weak frame, because that says that you are very afraid of being found out. You're not going to have success with women under any circumstances where they get more time with you, right? They're going to smell immediately, oh, you're really neurotic. And this is what I said. I said, I'm talking about frame because you lack it. You're a perfect example of a man incapable of getting a woman to ever love or sacrifice anything for him. Forget marriage. You could be single out of abundance, but you're single out of fear. You know, if a woman knew you, she'd leave. And that is 100%. I've seen guys like this before. And you know, as if to underline all this stuff, he says, like a few days later, he says, I've cohabitated with a chick once. It lasted a grand total of 8 months. Even then, I felt mostly quite powerless. She had a lot of leverage over my life, and as dumb as she was, even she knew it. Imposing boundaries on her, saying rules was a futile endeavor. She just flouted everything with, what are you going to do about it? Smug look on her face. Never again. I mean, talk about like outing yourself. Like, and look, if this guy was less judgmental of other people, I wouldn't be judgmental of him, because, hey, you got to figure things out. You know, it's not to say that like every guy's always perfect, or that we don't have moments in our life where we didn't understand women and we were powerless. But this whole thing right here, this is just admitting like you suck with women on a deep level. You suck. Like, you had some girl who was dumb and she completely did whatever she wanted. She didn't care because she didn't love you. She saw that she could get away with it. So, you know, and this is what I said, like, she didn't respect you, review you as a leader. No wonder your advice for men is get in and out before she figures you out. That's the only sexual strategy for weak men. So I'm telling you guys this, guys like Jay, I'm picking on him because he's he came at me. So he gets picked on now. That's how it works, right? You're going to talk shit to me, you're going to get featured on my show, and I'm going to use you as an example. But the issue here is that these guys are not able, they're terrified of getting close to women. They don't want to figure out how to actually get a woman to want to be with them. And it's the same thing with these rad femme women on their own part. They, you know, I got so many comments from these women about, oh, like you're just saying women have to have sex with a man. They have to do this. They have to do this. You don't have to do anything. Do you want to have a good relationship or not? If you want to have a good relationship, you think about, you know, what does the opposite sex need? And then you bring it to the table and you operate in good faith with that person. That's how you build a good relationship, right? You face your fear of getting rejected, or, you know, of them leaving you if you express what you actually want. To some extent, you face the fear of actually going up and talking to them, right? That whole process, the courtship process. Then you have to understand how they work, understand that on a personal level, but also, you know, as a man, as a woman, right? And then you operate in good faith to change things, to improve things. That's what it is. If you're not operating in good faith, if you're afraid and you don't understand what happened, you'll just say, oh, it's a bad idea. You know, you're either the one girl, the one turf girl who says, oh, well, you know, oh, like, if you like, the only thing to get from a man is to get alimony. You know what I mean? You know, if you never put a man on the birth certificate of your kids, just take his money. And then you have this guy's like, never give a woman commitment. It's just two sides of the same coin. And honestly, it's pretty boring. And the people who do it are always miserable. And I'm going to leave this about Jay. This is from Brooding Sea, another great account. And he sniffed him out, right? So there's more here that I didn't talk about. I couldn't find the message, but, you know, Jay is completely cut off from his family, right? Doesn't have any connection to his family. He's basically alone in the world. And so, you know, I feel bad for him in a certain sense. It's pretty, you know, pretty tragic, but no wonder he's so bitter. No wonder he's so depressed about things. It's just, he has no love or connection with anybody. So he has to judge himself by materialist things. And, you know, sexual conquest is a materialist thing. So, but Brooding sniffed him out. And you know, I could smell it too, but he did some of the details, right? Actually looking through his stuff, because I have no interest in even looking through Jay's account. Let's play PUA police, only in this case, he wasn't a skilled PUA. He was using Tinder to bang lows and mids. If you want to know why he's become the male version of a feminist, it's because of his buried reluctance to admit he was gutter dating on Tinder. It's a common theme with these Americans, their refusal to admit they wasted their peak years on mediocrity and swill and blame the customer, not the product. The tells: number one, online girls only. Number two, straight to his house for a date with a stranger, low value female. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm just making an interruption here on the tweet. I know another guy who, you know, notorious for sleeping with like over 1,000 girls. His whole game strategy was to pull fat girls at the club at like 2 a.m. So drunk fat girls. And it was very efficient, let's put it that way. And like, why? Like, why would you want to live like that? And it's true, you know, what woman is going to just come directly to your house? Like, you have to have a major value differential. And, you know, so unless you are like a celebrity, it's going to be a low value female, basically. Number three, girls appeared to do so based on looks. If it wasn't him, she would be banging someone else that night. The scratch your itch, next swipe mentality. Absolutely. Number four, boilerplate, unimaginative rote copy, rinse and repeat. Only works with low tier yes girls. If you've seen any of his online dating texts, you can see that this is absolutely the case. He should have read Tackling Texting, my book on texting. Number five, all historic lays. Now his looks have faded. He's invisible for online dating, hence his historic case studies. And yeah, what he was pointing out was that all of the stuff that Jay's talking about happened a decade ago. Number six, creeping indicators of hatred towards women as his results diminished. Number seven, major reframes of female behavior to suit this new reality. Number eight, inability to adapt to his loss of SMV and online appeal leads to blaming tactics and shaming instead of admitting these online dating girls no longer want what he's selling and adapting new thinking. Ultimately, if you surround yourself in shit, you begin to smell of it. No wonder the space is a mess, as this Pied Piper bullshit artist leads the fools off a cliff. Verdict, grade A fraud, cope, hatred, and zero game. Well, Brooding C is a guy who actually goes out and approaches women in the street. He does well for himself. So I agree with that entirely. So guys, look, I hope you learned something here. Some cautionary tales. You know, drama's drama, right? I wish these guys the best. You know what I mean? I wish these guys the best, but everybody has their own path. And really what this is about is I want you guys to understand that there is hope. If you humble yourself and you try to understand what's going on, if you face fear, your fear of things, whether that's approaching women, whether that's getting what you want in a relationship, if you're willing to expand your awareness and learn, understand what's going on, right? And if you are willing to operate in good faith, you will get that relationship. You'll get it. You'll get what you want. Okay? You'll get what you want. You'll actually get that connection. And, you know, we don't need to be bitter about this. There is absolutely hope out there. And we resonate that hope outwards to other people by what we do. There are solutions. If there's a problem, there's a solution. Let's be part of the solution, guys. All right. I'll see you next time.